Hi, welcome to the latest EARTH911.com podcast. We are getting ready for Earth Week, but let's jump right into our recycling and sustainability news information. First of all, EARTH911 has launched a great new database of Earth Day events in the largest cities in the United States. So head on over to EARTH911.com homepage and search for the events in your area. Now, we've invited Mitch Ratcliffe, the publisher of EARTH911.com, to talk about the site's plans. So, Mitch, what can you tell us about what's going on at EARTH911.com?
Well, Earth Week 2018 is going to be a big Earth Day for EARTH911. We've been around for 19 years, but this year we're going to start a new campaign to start to offer consumer information about pre-purchase decisions, as well as a lot more consciousness awareness raising material to help people make better decisions when they're shopping. And so we've got a couple of things that we're going to be rolling out this week. The first of them is a database of Earth Day events. Now, amazingly, there isn't a database of Earth Day events anywhere that reaches across the country to larger cities. And you'll be able to go to the site and search and review for more than 70 cities in the United States, lists of stories that are going or events that are going to be going on. Those might be park cleanups, they could be marches, they could be informational and other kinds of events as well. And that database is just the tip of the spear of the stuff that we're introducing. So this same week, we're also going to add the ability to search on Alexa for those same events. So you'll be able to ask Alexa to open our app and say, what's going on for Earth Day in Seattle?
Great. And so what else have you been doing? I know that you're somewhat new to the EARTH911.com arena.
Well, you know, we just, my team just took over the site, and we're making those changes I'm talking about, which is a focus on consumer awareness. Something really big is happening in society right now, and that is people are starting to take sustainability and social responsibility on the part of companies seriously. Just a few years ago, it was the case that maybe a third of people in the United States would be even willing to pay a 5% premium for something that was sustainable or responsible in a product. By 2015, that number had gone well over 50%. And you can see clearly in the generational changes that younger people are driving this even further. Millennials, 77% of them will pay substantially more, up to 30%, 20% more for something they believe is good for the planet. Generation Z is even more strongly, they feel more strongly that way. So we believe that right now is the time to help people consolidate their power as consumers, so they can tell business what they want out of the products and services that they use, that they spend their money on, that they be sustainable, that people are treated right. Particularly in the case of environmental impact, we've partnered with a company called CSR Hub. And CSR Hub aggregates reports about companies' sustainability and social responsibility from all over the world and puts it in one set of ratings, one for environmental, one for social, and so forth. And so you'll be able to find out before you buy from a company what their environmental rating is through EARTH911. And we think that's a really important step in the right direction.
So it sounds like in addition to being a central location for a lot of really great information, you're also sort of looking at the advocacy piece too.
Absolutely. But advocacy for individual change, you know, the idea that each of us can make a difference. Yeah. And that's what's going to be cool.
That's really cool. That's great. Well, and what's the plan for the next Earth Day, since we're going to look ahead a little bit? Well,
this database is going to grow. We're going to continue to add to it. We're also talking with Earth Day about how we can collaborate to do this next year in a much bigger and more comprehensive way. You know, they have more than 95,000 teachers around the United States teaching Earth Day event lessons and having activities. Those kinds of things will be available, hopefully. We'll be able to bring a lot more of the organizational information about what's going on for the event, as well as other things that are coming up, like the March for the Oceans in June. So we hope to help people organize and help them self-organize to be more effective as consumers to demand sustainability.
That sounds excellent. Next, I wanted to follow up on one of the stories that was recently on the EARTH911.com website. And this is from Trey Granger, one of our writers. And Trey, you have looked recently at pill blister packs. So are you on the line, Trey?
I am.
Great. So tell me a little bit about blister packs, what they are, and what the problem is that they're causing.
Yeah, so blister packs are used to package a variety of different materials. You could have medications, like if you have the packs with the foil on the back of them. It could be for toys, that clamshell that would contain the paper as well as the plastic. A nice variety of materials used for blister packs for packaging. And they're usually made of one of several different types of plastic, either polyvinyl chloride, which is known as number 3 plastic, or some are made of high-density polyethylene, number 2 plastic, and occasionally you'll find some with polypropylene, number 5 plastic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So, I actually never thought about the little pill packs that, like your Advil cold medicine comes in. How do these things get recycled?
So basically, as long as your recycling program will accept rigid plastics, they will accept any blister packs as well. Rigid plastics are a general catch-all for any plastics that aren't bags or bottles. And the reason they're called rigid is essentially if you try to smash that plastic or crunch it in your hand, it's not going to collapse. If you try to collapse a bottle or a bag, it will collapse. But the rigids, they're either going to crack or they're going to return to the original form once you stop collapsing.
So rigid plastic's an important thing these days in the geopolitical sense. Why is that?
The big reason for that is because the primary market for rigid plastics right now has been shipping them to China. And the Chinese have, over the last year, produced new legislation that says they're going to ban the importing of certain products, rigid plastics being one of them. So in the very real future, we might not be able to recycle rigid plastics as easily as we have been for the past several years.
Trey, I've read something about that too. Do you know whether there's any sort of emerging plans in this country to be able to recycle some of these materials that we've traditionally sent to China?
So far, I'm unaware of any plans that are being made to handle this plastic. I think it still has a little time to be developed because there are several recyclers in America that do handle specifically polypropylene as a major type of rigid plastic. And so there is an ability to process for the short term, just as soon as those recyclers start getting more demand or more supply than they have use of, then you're going to start to see more of a need for additional solutions.
Okay. Well, that's something we're definitely going to be following in future podcasts, I think. Well, Trey, tell me this. So let's say I have a blister pack, a pill pack perhaps, and I want to recycle it. What should I do to make it recycling ready?
So the biggest thing to do for the blister packs is most often they have multiple materials inside. So you'll have an aluminum backing or a paper backing where they have instructions. You might have a manual inside the blister pack if it's for a toy or an electronic. You want to try to separate out plastic from the other materials. And the reason for that is because when they go to a material recovery facility or a MRF, the separation is crucial to allow that MRF to separate all the materials out. Because if you keep the plastic with the aluminum or the paper, it's probably going to have everything go to a plastic recycler, and then that paper is just going to be viewed as contamination and thrown away. Okay. So if you can separate everything out, you can actually recycle the aluminum and the paper and the plastic separately.
Okay. Now, if I live in an area where I don't have this type of recycling at my curb, what options should I take up?
It's pretty tricky for the rigid plastics. There aren't really a lot of good mail-in programs or other opportunities at this point. I know TerraCycle has been working with a lot of these companies to figure out mail-in programs on a brand-by-brand basis. So you could always check with TerraCycle and see if the company that you have purchased a product from has a brigade set up with them.
Okay. And do we have a link to that TerraCycle contact information on our website? Is that in the story?
Well, we'll put it in the...
I believe it is in the story.
Okay, I thought it was, but I couldn't remember. Great. Well, Trey, was there anything else that we wanted to talk about regarding blister packs that we didn't cover yet?
I think the big thing is consumers just got to be aware that it is a material that has a limited recycling market. When you compare it to something like bottles or bags, where they've actually defined really good markets for that resin of plastic, there hasn't really been that definition yet for what's going to happen to the polypropylene or the other rigid plastic when it goes to a recycler. They need to be able to sell it in order to take it, and the market's pretty limited in the U.S. as far as products being made from recycled polypropylene or other rigid plastics.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like in the near term, too, that we should all be thinking about whether, we can avoid purchasing some of these types of plastics, too, because of the trickiness in recycling them.
Yeah, I mean, most medications are now available in plastic bottle form. So if you can find a way to get it in a plastic bottle, like the white pill bottles with the safety caps, those are much easier to recycle in the U.S. than the blister packs.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Trey.
Okay, hey, it's springtime.
Okay, so it's springtime. Here in the Tacoma area, we have a beautiful sunny day. Starts raining again tomorrow, but today it's beautiful. But this is the perfect time for talking about a new compost pile. Sarah Lozanova is one of our writers, and she is joining us to talk about starting a compost pile. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hi. So
Hi.
Before we start talking about starting a new compost pile, could you talk about the various approaches to composting that you've looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. The concepts are the same throughout. They're mimicking the cycle of nature to put materials back into the earth. But there are different approaches that you can take. So, for example, in a city, a worm bin or a vertically stacking option is a great idea because it takes up less space. A keyhole garden is a fun option. It's a raised bed where there's a keyhole shape where you can walk in to access the middle of the raised bed. And people often put a compost pile in the middle. And this is really water efficient because then when you wet the compost pile, the water then goes out into the garden and feeds nutrients into it. If you want to reuse materials, upcycle materials, or if you're on a budget, you can make compost bins out of milk crates or out of wood pallets as well. There's also an approach where you use a barrel and there's a hand crank, and this is great for stirring the compost pile. So this might be a good option, say, for seniors or families with young children. In my neighborhood, we use a 3-bin system, and that's great for large capacity situations or in households where you really want a high quality finished product, because then you have different bins for different stages in the garden.
So you'd actually move it between one and another?
Yeah, you could either move it or you could say, hey, everyone use the middle bin for new stuff.
Okay.
The left bin might have the finished product and the far right one might have something in between.
Kids love turning the barrel, I know that.
Yeah, probably more than using a pitchfork.
Are there better ones for different regions? That's the thing I've wondered about. I mean, I know a lot of people are in very dry regions. Others, like in the Northwest, are in very wet regions. Is there a better solution for certain environments?
Not that I'm aware of, but in different environments, you might have different considerations. For example, if you need to be able to irrigate your compost pile or get it wet once a week, you might want to have a garden hose that reaches to it, or like I said, in some space-constrained areas, you might want something that has a smaller footprint. Or if you really want to conserve water, then the keyhole garden is a great idea because then any excess water is then used to irrigate your raised bed.
So which one are you going to use, Evelyn?
Well, I have always meant to have a compost pile, and I never have. So, Sarah, if you were telling someone who was brand new to this, what are the 3 or 4 things I could do to get started?
Yeah, there's a few basic concepts that you want to keep in mind. One of them is what to include and what not to include. So if you're going to use the compost on food crops, you're not going to want to include pet waste, for example. Mm-hmm. You definitely don't want to include diseased plants because then you can be spreading those diseases to your garden.
Mm-hmm.
And you also don't want to use plants that have gone to seed, especially invasive plants. And then if you want your compost pile to break down more quickly and to not attract pests, you're going to want to avoid putting in food scraps that contain oil, dairy products, and meat.
Okay.
And you're definitely going to want to take labels off of fruit. That's a really easy one to miss. And you're going to want to avoid using compostable plastics because home compost piles don't typically get warm enough or hot enough to break them down.
Mm-hmm.
You're also going to want to stir your compost about once a week. And if it's dry, you're going to want to get it wet as well to keep it a little bit moist.
Okay.
And then the last concept that's really good to know about is to keep the proper brown-green ratio. So green materials would be things like vegetable scraps, food waste, coffee grounds, grass clippings, and eggshells. Mm-hmm. And these contain a higher ratio of nitrogen. And then the brown materials are things such as straw, branches, and dead leaves. And those contain a higher ratio of carbon. So if you get the carbon-nitrogen ratio right, your compost pile is going to have a more pleasant odor, and it's going to break down faster and attract fewer pests.
What's sort of the right ratio of, let's say, the brown clippings and dead leaves and things like that as compared to kitchen waste? What should I do, like 1/3 of one or?
Yeah, it's about 1-to-1.
Okay.
So what we do in my neighborhood is we have a straw bale next to the compost. And so we just put a little layer of straw on top. But thin branches work really well too, as do dead leaves.
Okay. If I start a pile, about how long will it take before I have some good grainy, composty type mulchy soil to add to my garden?
It's a really good question. I would imagine it probably depends a little bit on the climate. Mm-hmm. For example, where I live in Maine, it's below freezing for several months of the year. It would also depend if you get the ratio right and what materials you're using. Like if you have a lot of melons and you're not cutting up the rinds. But I'd say roughly about a year.
Okay.
You mentioned worms earlier. Do they speed the process up or do they result in a different kind of mulch?
It's a different approach. So when I lived in a city at one point, we had a worm bin because the landlord was afraid of attracting rats. And so we used a worm bin. And so we had, I believe it was a plastic bin with some holes in it. And I think we put in red worms and then torn up pieces of newspaper. And then we just put our food waste directly into that. And the same rules applied. Like we also avoided dairy products and oily foods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, Sarah, is there anything else about sort of compost pile do's and don'ts that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
I guess one thing I would say is that if it smells or if there seem to be a lot of flies or things like that, then it's an indication that something's off. So maybe the brown to green ratio's off, or maybe it's not getting stirred enough, because stirring it's really important because it feeds oxygen for the microbes. So the microbes that you want aren't going to be healthy if they're not getting enough oxygen. So if something's off, just play detective and figure out what it is to get things back on track. Because sometimes people then get discouraged and kind of abandon their efforts.
Right. Hey, Mitch, if people have questions about their compost pile, can they send them to EARTH911.com? Oh,
absolutely. We've got articles, including the one by Sarah this week, obviously. But we're also going to be adding more.
Great. So that's really helpful. If people do get to a point where they need some help, we have some help available.
Yep.
Great. Super. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. That sounds wonderful. And I might actually get my compost pile started this year.
That's fantastic.
So the next section that we had to go over this week was tuning up our sustainability smarts. Mitch, would you like to tell us about EARTH911.com and sustainability quizzes?
Well, so we're going to be introducing this week for Earth Day a series of 5 quizzes that you can take. They're 5-question quizzes, so one each day. And they're designed really to get you thinking about the difference that you can make when you make a different purchase decision. There's a lot of jobs that are driven by recycling in the United States. There's a lot of economic activity. There's surprising things. I'm trying not to give away the answers to the questions.
Right. Okay.
Who, for instance, was the first scientist to identify the possibility of global warming, which is actually one of my favorite trivia questions in the 5
I have no idea.
It's a surprise.
Okay.
But we want people to be in the habit of thinking about this before they make a decision, whether that is to throw something away or to buy something. So the sustainability quizzes are a way to get your brain sharp on the topic.
I love that. So starting on Monday, April 16th, a quiz a day.
Quiz a day. And
very good.
After Earth Day, we'll be switching to twice a week because they take a lot of time to put together.
Okay. Well, in the category of motivation, if I do a quiz and I do well, do I get anything?
You do.
Oh.
Now, it's not when you do well.
Okay.
We did not want to get into a competition or encourage wagering. But what we're going to do is pick 100 people who enter randomly to get a custom-made T-shirt that we've printed up for Earth Day this year for EARTH911 logo. And with our partner ISRI, which is the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries, they've helped us put this shirt out. So we're going to be sending the shirt to 100 winners.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Quizzes beginning April 16th, daily. You can win T-shirts. Sounds like fun.
Well, we want to change the world. We got to do something to get people there.
Absolutely. Well, the other thing that we were going to do today was follow up on some of the questions that we've received on the website from the community. Every day, EARTH911.com is searched thousands of times for recycling information. Our search tools let you look for recyclers by the type of material you want to recycle, and it features more than 100,000 locations, both mail-in and charitable programs, for putting your waste to better use. We also get hundreds of questions each week, and we will be answering the hard and or interesting recycling questions from the EARTH911.com community on the show. So let's get started. I'll tell you what, Mitch, how about if you read the first question from Eric in Atlanta?
Well, Eric in Atlanta has 200 gallons of kerosene sitting out back of his house and wanted to know what to do with it. Turns out that his local municipal recycling program doesn't accept this at this point. And so we did a little extra research. So, unfortunately, what you have to do with a solvent or a fuel like kerosene is let it evaporate. Oh. And the thing that you're if you can't get rid of it, and our producer Doug is making a face like, oh my gosh.
That's a lot.
So you have to put this out somewhere away from the kids, away from pets and animals, and I would actually recommend covering it in such a way with a screen, something that would keep things out.
That's air permeable.
So that it can begin to evaporate. Kerosene evaporates rapidly, not quite as fast as gas, but pretty fast, certainly a lot faster than water. Problem is when organics get into it, it creates a gunge that makes it even worse to get rid of at the end of the day. And at the end of the evaporation cycle, you've got hydrocarbons in the bottom of the can, just like you would with paint.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So at that point, then you can triple wrap that in plastic and put it in the dump. But if you can't recycle it, that's what you have to do with it.
Okay. Well, so, and what I really like about this answer is what you're also saying is don't pour it down the drain.
Oh, no, absolutely
not. I mean, there is a way to deal with this in a more safe and responsible and ecological manner.
This is not your great-grandfather's farm where you go out back and dump it in the ground.
Right. Yeah. No. So evaporate it, and then when you're left with the residuals, triple wrap it in plastic.
Yep.
I'm thinking like those big heavy-duty lawn waste leaf bags, those black garbage bags,
work.
something like that?
Would work.
Okay.
So, Trey, let me ask you about Atlanta in general. It's in the state of Georgia, obviously. Why is the state of Georgia an unusual place for recycling things like kerosene?
So Georgia is one of the few states that doesn't operate any sort of household hazardous waste program. You can find some solutions for things like paint in Metro Atlanta, but for the majority of the household hazardous waste materials, what the state advises is if you can solidify it, you are legally allowed to dispose of it in the garbage. But they definitely don't want you pouring it down drains or anything to that extent.
So the description of letting it evaporate that I shared is really all you can do in Georgia.
Yes, or the suggestion you had about triple wrapping it and putting it in the garbage.
Right, that's amazing. Is that a regional characteristic, or is that spread all over the country?
The only state that I'm aware of that does that is Georgia. Typically, states provide funding for household hazardous waste at the community level, and Georgia is one state that has identified it's not within their budget protocols to provide those services.
Great.
Good. Well, Eric, good luck. And if you have additional questions, go back to the website and let us know. Now, our second question, interesting question, is from Teresa in Texas, who asks, where can I recycle Teflon-coated pans? Mitch, what did you say to that?
Well, you've got two things here. You have the Teflon coating, which is something separate from the pan itself. Unfortunately, the pan is the large part of this, so you have to focus on that when making a decision about where to take it. You've got to take it to a scrapyard rather than to the dump or to most recycling programs. Scrapyards specialize in recycling metals, steel, aluminum, and so forth. So you would need to take that to a scrapyard in order to have it taken care of appropriately. If you throw it away, the metal obviously takes a very long time to break down, and in the case of aluminum, wouldn't break down. And, I wanted to ask if Trey knew anything more about this, because this is a topic that's close to some of the things he's written about.
Trey, can you help us out with this area?
The beauty of metal is that as long as it's 50% metal, a scrap metal recycler will accept it. And so they have technology they can use to remove any sort of coating. But metal is so valuable that as long as it's a majority metal, you're going to find it's very easy to recycle.
Yeah. And do you have to be concerned about the coatings? Is that something that you need to be aware of even when you're as a consumer, just cooking with it? Is that something that you should be looking for? Or is it breaking up?
No, there's no real environmental risk for the coatings.
Okay.
Well, I will tell you, Mitch, I'm a big proponent of old school cast iron. So at some point, we might get into the question of how do you proof your cast iron, because once you have proofed it, it is nonstick and it will last for generations.
I've actually never had a coated pan, so I have to ask.
Yeah.
I cured my iron pans years ago, and I love them.
They're the best.
Yeah.
They're the best. All right. Well, we also had an inquiry from Pat in Russell, Ohio, asking, do I need to recycle water-based paints?
Well, Evelyn, the thing you have to do with water-based paint is keep in mind that there's a particulate in it that gives it the color, right? And if you let water-based paint sit for a long time, you'll see that settle down. That's the same thing you're trying to deal with in oil and vinyl-based paints, right? But they have a different kind of medium. And so water-based paint can evaporate into a hard substance, and that can be tossed away in a limited set of ways safely. So you should take that to a hazardous materials facility, whether that's your municipal site or otherwise, to get rid of. But you can just let it evaporate and throw it out.
Okay.
But throw it out correctly.
Okay. Well, we have sort of a related question in the area of paint and paint cans. Maha in Los Angeles asks, where can I dispose of old paint cans?
Well, Maha's situation was interesting because when she first asked the question, she didn't ask what kind of can. And there are two kinds of paint cans.
Okay.
So you've got plastic paint cans and metal paint cans, and they have to go to different places based on the materials that the cans are in many cases. So you have to pay attention to that in addition to what kind of paint it is. So if you've got a oil-based paint, for instance, you're going to have to take it to an oil-based facility. water-based or vinyl, just the same thing. But you're going to have to keep in mind what it's in as well, and call ahead to the recycling facility to see whether or not they'll accept that.
Okay. Well, and I think that this is a really important point, and that is that in most places there is a recycling or garbage collection facility, and they will answer your questions if you get in touch with them, because they don't want things to be put in the landfills that are not appropriate for landfills either. Right. So that's a resource. And then, of course, our website. We have some excellent articles.
And we do have a page dedicated to how to recycle paint. You'll find it in the recycling guides. It's right on the top of the front page.
Perfect. So we have one last question. This is from Suzanne in New Hampshire, who asks, I am looking for locations that accept rags. And I think we have down that in this case, rags are defined as clothing and household lines that are too old or stained or worn for further use as originally intended.
So this is a question I'd like to ask Trey. What would you recommend to somebody who has basically worn out rags that might have been used in a variety of ways? What would you tell them to do when going through all that material before recycling it?
So there's an industry that focuses on textiles, which would include rags, called the Secondary Materials and Recycled Textiles Association. And they actually, on their website, which I believe is smart.org, they have a list of clothing recyclers that you can actually partner with. What consumers are often surprised to hear is that in many cases, the bins that you might find in the parking lots of malls and such that say donate clothing, they will actually be clothing that is not wearable anymore, because they partner with these types of clothing recyclers. Typically, the clothing recycler wants to have material in volume. And so if you have only 2 or 3 rags, you're going to be better off donating it to a clothing donation place that can then partner with a recycler to properly dispose of that item.
So if I have a big bag, or many big bags, do they need to be separated out, or should I just take them in and let the recycler deal with that?
No, the only trick would be is if the rag was used for any sort of hazardous. So like if you were mentioning oil-based paint earlier, if you were using it to apply oil-based paint or remove oil-based paint from a wall, there's a rule by the EPA called the hazardous derived rule. And what that says is anything that's coming in contact with hazardous waste is by default hazardous waste. If you're using these rags for any sort of hazardous material, there's a separate protocol for that.
And so would that include rags I used around a shop, like with oil stains?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks, Trey. That's very helpful, which is exactly what EARTH911 is supposed to do.
Yep. So that covers the sort of community questions that we had. Mitch, what sort of issues do you think we're going to be taking up in the next few weeks?
Well, we have a number of things coming out around Earth Day, obviously, and we urge people to keep an eye on the site. Post Earth Day, we'll be adding the twice weekly quizzes. There's going to be a bunch of new information embedded in articles. Keep an eye out for the environmental ratings of companies. That's going to be a really big one. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more content on the site, stuff that you can share, stuff that inspires, and stuff that helps you make decisions.
Great.
It's going to be a great move in the right direction, we think.
Well, and for those of you listening, we would really appreciate your feedback, too. And there will be a place on the website to give some comments back and ask questions and tell us a little bit about things you'd like us to do a deeper dive into on our podcasts.
You can always send a message to feedback@earth911.com, and we'll get back to you. We have that actually staffed these days, watching and answering questions, which is where all the questions this morning came from.
Great. Well, these are good questions.
Well, these are smart people.
These are smart people. Excellent. All right. Well, that's all we have for today's edition of EARTH911.com podcast.
Thanks, everybody.